Karl Marx on Greater Yankeeland. Has any character of the left, socialist, communist, anarchist, social democrat recognized him as Karl Marx did several times, the progressive role of the bourgeoisie? Not only does it recognize its civilizing role when it arose against feudalism, but in its capacity for constant renewal, and not only in the aspects of creation of machinery and other inventions but in the reinvention of its political, economic, legal, and cultural institutions. For example, Marx went to live in London, which by then was the capital of the most advanced country of its time, but from there he saw how in other parts purer forms of economy emerged in the United States, as more abstract forms of government emerged that had nothing to do with religion, with laws purely oriented to production, with a democracy that didn't care about social position, income, or skin color. In the Communist Manifesto itself it states, the bourgeoisie, with the rapid improvement of all the means of production, with the incredible facilities of its communications network, brings civilization to the most savage nations. 1. Usually the aforementioned critics, almost always illiterate academics of the real world outside their universities, describe capitalism with moral and ethical categories that they themselves invented to intervene and defend their beliefs in supporting governments that have a large budget to subtract power from the individual. They never attack their ideal governments, the former USSR, Cuba, and even feudalism, focus on attacking the big bourgeoisie, big capital, being that Marx admired them for their great ability to innovate and do great works. He even showed admiration not once but several times, and did not do so for any other country. Let us continue with a few more words of Marx, the anti-imperialist par excellence. Joke, is it a disgrace that by the prompt exploitation of their gold mines the energetic Yankees have increased the circulation, have concentrated in a few years a large population and a large trade in the most convenient part of the Pacific coast, have built large cities, have they organized sea lines, are they making railroads from New York to San Francisco, that will open the Pacific Ocean to civilization for the first time, and give for the third time in history a new orientation to world trade? It may be that for all this he suffers the independence of a few Californians and Texans of Spanish origin. They may sometimes suffer from justice and other moral principles, but what does it matter compared to other world historical events? Recall that they even made the necessary arrangements to acquire the bedside table, a part of Mexico, so that the railroad would surround the mountain range of the United States. Railways in 2006, Wikipedia. Before they ceded the lands of California to the Yankees, they had already found gold, and in 1849, the Golden Rush occurred, the frantic race for gold. Spain and Mexico were not able to populate or produce these large and vast lands for 300 years. The United States in a year managed to inspire large layers of the population to emigrate of their own volition, not only from that nation but from Europe itself, from the First World, let alone from other less civilized countries. The very religious intolerance of Spain and the nascent Mexico that only endured Catholics and Spaniards in their land limited their creativity as well as their own mentality of only seeking wealth and not looking for work. 18 months ago they have discovered the Californian mines, and the Yankees have already embarked on the construction of a railroad, a large highway, a canal from the Gulf of Mexico. The steamers sail on regular voyages from New York to Chagres. Pacific Ocean trade is already concentrated in Panama, drags the reluctant barbarian people's world trade, civilization. Thanks to the indefatigable energy of the Yankees, soon the Pacific coast will be as populated, as open to trade, as industrialized as the Boston coast is today. 2. By 1860 the line that would connect California, the west with the east, was finished. The Spaniards had 300 years to do something productive with those lands, and they did not succeed since it was not in their interest to do so. And Mexico was just beginning to be born. Even 40 years after its independence from Spain the country was still hesitant if it embraced monarchy or liberalism. In the same capital he would write about the inventive capacity of the Americans. The Yankees have invented machines for chopping stones. The English do not employ them, since the miserable, Wretch is for English political economy a technical term with which it designates the agricultural worker, who performs that work receives as payment such a tiny part of his work, that the machinery would make production more expensive from the point of view of the capitalist. 3. And it's not the only time he points it out. Hence today machines are invented in England that are only used in North America, just as in the 16th and 17th centuries Germany invented machines that only Holland used, and that more than one French invention of the 18th century was exploited only in England. The other countries were hindered by their feudal relations, their ancestor who did not allow the rapid use of inventions and improvements that the citizens of that country themselves could make. 4. The bearded trier alludes to the Yankee sense of independence and individual ability. 5. To explain many of the aspects that the freedom of the human being can do when he has no obstacles that limit his view of the world. That with your daily work you build in communion a better whole, on new values that are more productive and efficient. Hence the importance of the sense of independence and their individual capacity. It was such that competition from the Yankees paralyzed the export of Russian agricultural products to European markets. 6. And all due to the simple formula of undertaking from scratch, in land where nothing exists. In the following passage we see how Marx describes how laborious Americans are who develop multiple jobs, know how to do everything, and that for those years being a farmer was an incredibly secondary activity. Since in the colonies there is not yet a split between the worker and his working conditions, between him and the root of these, the land, or as it only occurs sporadically or only has a restricted field of action, there is still no divorce between agriculture and industry, nor has the rural domestic industry been annihilated. Where, then, would the internal market for capital come from? No part of the population of North America is exclusively agricultural, except for slaves and their owners, who combine capital and labor to do great works. Free Americans, who cultivate the soil themselves, are engaged at the same time in many other occupations. Commonly they themselves produce a part of the furniture and instruments they use. They usually build their own houses and bring the products of their own industry to the market, however distant it may be. They are spinners and weavers, make soap and candles, make shoes and dresses for their personal use. In North America, agriculture is often the accessory activity of the blacksmith, the miller, or the shopkeeper. Among such bizarre individuals, where is there room for the renunciation of the capitalist? 7. Since in the colonies there is not yet a split between the worker and his working conditions, between him and the root of these, the land, or as it only occurs sporadically or only has a restricted field of action, there is still no divorce between agriculture and industry, nor has the rural domestic industry been annihilated. Where, then, would the internal market for capital come from? No part of the population of North America is exclusively agricultural, except for slaves and their owners, who combine capital and labor to do great works. Free Americans, who cultivate the soil themselves, are engaged at the same time in many other occupations. Commonly they themselves produce a part of the furniture and instruments they use. They usually build their own houses and bring the products of their own industry to the market, however distant it may be. They are spinners and weavers, make soap and candles, make shoes and dresses for their personal use. In North America, agriculture is often the accessory activity of the blacksmith, the miller, or the shopkeeper. Among such bizarre individuals, where is there room for the renunciation of the capitalist? 8. Contrary to what one might think that Marx is against big industry, or big capital, he repeatedly shows the fundamental role in the development of society. Here he speaks to us of the dual process of progress, construction and destruction that any advance entails. The more progress there is in the quantitative and qualitative, the more destruction of the old ones, the old forms disappear or tend to disappear. And the one who best fulfills this progressive role is big industry. This process of destruction is all the faster, the more a country takes, in the case of the United States of America, for example, to big industry as a starting point and foundation for its development. 9. Here is a paradigm that Marx expounds in his book Capital on the great productivity in America at that time, but in 1860, In the modern manufacture of envelopes, for example, one worker folded the paper with the folding, another gummed it, a third turned the flap on which the mark is printed, another dented this mark, etc., and in each of these partial operations each of the envelopes necessarily had to change hands. A single envelope making machine executes all these operations in one fell swoop and produces 3,000 and more envelopes per hour. An American paper bag making machine, exhibited at the 1862 London Industrial Exhibition, cuts paper, thickens, folds and makes 300 pieces per minute. 18,000 per hour. 10. It is because of the speed of development, because it starts from scratch in many respects that the United States triumphed and why Karl Marx admires that development and proposes it as a guide. This is one of the secrets of cities emerging that point towards progress. They have no preconceived prejudices. Just look at the example of New York's growth. As we have said above, no nation was recognized by Marx as having so many virtues. Here he points out inventivity and precisely that image we have. The lifestyle, the things we use, cars, type of house, etc., comes from that country. Woodworking machines, which can also be used on a small scale, are for the most part American invention. 11. It is not a people that starts to make a theory, and another, since its tradition does not come from the church as in France or Spain that are very given to very elaborate analyses and presumptions that are useless. That is why they remain the most developed nation. If only other countries had heard how to develop capitalism both as a system and in the countryside, but prejudices always betray us. The expropriation of the mass of the people stripped of the land, as we see, constitutes the foundation of the capitalist mode of production. The essence of a free colony is, conversely, that most of the land is still owned by the people, and therefore that each settler can convert a part of it into his private property and into an individual means of production, without preventing subsequent settlers from carrying out the same operation. This is the secret of both the prosperity of the colonies and the cancer that gnaws at them, their resistance to the establishment of capital. Where the land is very cheap and all men are free, where anyone who wishes can obtain for himself a piece of land, not only is the work very expensive as far as the part of his own product is concerned to the worker, but the difficult thing is to obtain combined work, at whatever price it is. 12. Where would Mexico be if it had begun, undertaken since 1810 without the cultural, legal burden of 300 years of xenophobic domination of Spain? But only now is the fundamental secret of how to make the worker a rational consumer revealed. Mr. Drummond visits the knife factory in Turner's Falls, on the Connecticut River, and Mr. Oakman, treasurer of the Joint Stock Company, after assuring him that American table cutlery is superior in quality to the English, continues, "We will beat England in prices too, we are already ahead of it when it comes to quality, as is well known, but we have to sell at lower prices, and we will do so when we get our steel cheaper and lower the price of our labor. Reduction of wages and extension of the working day, this is the core of the rational and healthy method that will elevate the worker to the dignity of rational consumer, so that he may configure a market capable of absorbing the multitude of objects that culture and progress recorded in inventions have put at his fingertips." 13. And it was achieved. Today the extension of the working day is a thing of the past, as well as low wages, and it will be more forgotten because of the automation and extreme robotization that is coming, that there will be practically no mechanical, heavy, or tedious work to perform. And so it was that now one of the great engines of the economy of developed countries is the internal market itself, the ability of its own inhabitants to acquire their goods, that is, the more middle class there is the better. The system itself is interested in a robust middle class and that poverty disappears. For those who believe that Karl Marx loved violence or revolutions, here he describes how production is paralyzed by war. American Civil War. Cotton famine. The greatest example of interruption of the production process due to scarcity and increase in the price of raw materials. 14. They always link Karl Marx with revolts or rebellions, and that is a super erroneous assessment. Marx approved some revolutions to accelerate the passage of the means of production and capital of ancient entities such as kings, feudals, church, landowners, etc., since their eagerness was not industrial production, less capitalist production. But he never encouraged any revolt, rebellion, and even any revolution. He tried to take advantage of them so that society would get rid of the old agents and old relations of production and change. He hoped that the changes would happen quickly due to the desperation of the working masses, but as time went on the economic level of the workers improved as did their working conditions. The economic crises were overcome, they were getting smaller and weaker, so Marx and Engels did not envision more revolutions but a peaceful transition. Which they were right. The revolts in Russia, China, etc., and their failures only prove the correctness of the observations of Marx and Engels. How many projects we do not know elaborated in the United States that have changed history. Surely the lifestyle of the reader is configured from head to toe by his inventions, from clothing, tastes, workplace, recreations, etc. Another American, Mr. Emery, of Albany, New York, succeeded, with a refinement as simple as it was effective, in making Whitney's machine obsolete. 15. Here is a small observation or criticism of the American media that already by that time gave something to talk about, and quite. Just as a certain number of workers employed simultaneously constitutes the material assumption for the division of labor within manufacturing, that assumption is, when it comes to the division of labor within society, the magnitude of the population and its density, which here substitute for agglomeration in the same workshop. However, this density is a relative element. A relatively sparsely populated country but whose media has reached a good development, it has a denser population than another, more populated but with undeveloped media. In this sense, for example, the northern states of the North American Union are more densely populated than India. 16. Did it occupy scientists and theorists to develop? Like those who abound in universities and who produce nothing more than trying to curb capitalism in their own country. On the part of economic science, Marx recognized Carey, the Yankee, the only original economist of the Americans. 17. I would also add that Benjamin Franklin in his exposition on value in capital is mentioned and recognized as a contributor to science. But Marx's acknowledgments of American theorists or ideologues are scarce. When he studies the rent of the land, he sees that the price of American cereals regulates that of the English. 18. It is for all of the above that Karl Marx predicted that it would become the most advanced country in the world with the most modern state, with its energy population, etc. a large market, a large producer of commodities and a great producer of gold. As if that were not enough, Karl Marx sees the positive, progressive aspect of the American Civil War. It should be remembered that the First Socialist International sent a letter of support to Abraham Lincoln, then president, in his struggle to keep his country together and eliminate Southern slavery. The year in which the English cotton industry reaches its zenith, who would have foreseen the overwhelming improvements of the machinery and the consequent displacement of manual labor, caused by the following 3 years under the spur of the American Civil War. 19. One more aspect that Marx points out is what boosted their development were the railroads, either without an increase in the market price, the location, because of the improvement of the means of communication, can bring into competition the best lands, as we see on a large scale in the American prairie states. This also occurs constantly in countries of ancient civilization, although not to the same extent as in colonies, where, as Wakefield correctly observes, the location is decisive. 20. After ostentatiously comparing English capitalist agriculture and its work combined with dispersed American peasant agriculture, Wakefield also lets us see, in a slip, the back of the medal. He describes the well-being, independence, entrepreneurial spirit, and relative culture of the mass of the American people, while the English farm worker is a miserable wretch, a pauper. 21. Engels making comparisons. In North America, the monetary economy was fully established and for more than a century, while in Russia the natural economy was almost exclusively the rule. I say goodbye reminding you that the most industrially developed country does nothing but show at least developed the image of its own future. 22 While this phrase was written, Marx in Capital in 1867. I would like to extend my comments on the subject of Karl Marx and the Yankees, which seems to me that the author studied has already touched on many topics. It may be argued that the negative aspects of the development of this nation ignore them, but Marx at no time leaves them aside for this country or for the other nations he studied. And I think that about them has already been written about it and fed enough to many academic intellectuals, highlighting only the negative aspects ad nauseam. This writing that I elaborate is the first in the whole world as far as the search on the internet indicates to me, in both Spanish and English. That is to say, neither in the United States nor in England except in Spain or Mexico there is a study with these peculiarities. Each country is master of its own destiny. The easiest thing is to blame another for its own misfortune.
Segui ahí el tuo corso, e lascia dir le genti.
Go your way and let people talk. Notes. Karl Marx, The Manifesto of the Communist Party. Excerpted from the article entitled The Guardianship of the United States, published on January 23, 1848. In Marx, K. 1972, Materials for Latin American History, Compilation, Mexico, Past Present. Karl Marx Friedrich Engels, Materials for the History of Latin America. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, November 30, 1854, The Mexican War. Karl Marx, Wage, Price, and Profit. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 3. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 3. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Note 107. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 3. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 2, Volume 5. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 3, Volume 6. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Note 10. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Karl Marx, Grundriss. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 3, Volume 8. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 2. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 3, Volume 8. Karl Marx, Capital, Book 1, Volume 3. Karl Marx, Capital, Volume 1, Volume 1. Friedrich Engels, Letter to N. F. Danielson.